Welcome to the Cross Counsel Podcast. We believe every person is created in the image of God, something we can never lose. Yet, over time, our likeness to Christ has been diminished and is in need of restoration. Each episode offers information that invites you toward transformation, leading to formation in Christ. But lasting change happens when you personally engage with our ministry and experience the melt process, where God renews the mind, heals the heart, and restores hope. Together, though none of us has arrived, we're discovering what it means to be fully alive in Him, immediate help, lasting hope, and changing generations. We thought we had wrapped up memory, but there was another thing that came to my mind about memory. And with memory, emotion, lie, truth, transformation, especially those first three, they really do kind of run together in a sense. They cross over. It's not always so cut and dried.
Yes.
And also, so we're going to talk about emotion next, and that kind of brings me back to some thoughts. What we've learned early on is that the emotion is the bridge to the lie, which is in memory.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it's been of amazing benefit to try to get the left brain out of the way or over to the side as people feel the present things that they're going through, the emotions that are bubbling up inside of them. And, over the past 25, 30 years, we've seen people, and ourselves too. I never would have thought of that memory. I haven't thought about that memory since I was a kid. They don't walk in saying, I need to address this memory. However, there are those cases, and there are some people that have tried different approaches and maybe try to combine approaches. And I don't have any problem with telling your story and mapping your story. And I've had people do that. They come from other seminars they've gone to or workshops, and it's just really important to understand your story. And by doing that, they start to see themes in their life and specific moments come in and they just take note of it. And I'm sure different approaches do that, but that's not the end game, is to just identify memory. So I think Dr. Smith years ago said that he had somebody come in with almost like an Excel spreadsheet of these are the memories that I know I need to work on. And it started with the first, right? And it was, do you remember that story?
No, I don't.
Okay. And he said, well, they came in with a list, and the first memory I know I need to deal with. And so they dove right in and got some beautiful resolve. And then they went to a second memory, and she's like, oh my goodness, this isn't nearly as bad as what it was like last night, me processing it, because there were things that are linked in there. And then got some resolve there, and then went to the third one and was like, this thing was so painful last night, and there's nothing there. And yet sometimes the teaching has been, just trust me, don't let people think about stuff, just let them feel. And yet I think it's okay if people come with those memories. I know I need to deal with this. I know I need to deal with the day that I didn't get the lead role in the play in eighth grade. I think, well, you should just get over that. Or I need to deal with my dad walking out on my mom.
Yeah.
You need to deal with this, and this. So have you had experience like that where people come already with memories in their agenda of this is what I want to deal with?
Sometimes they do, especially the very first time people come. They're coming because they know traumatic things or painful things happened to them, and they want to get those things resolved, thinking that event was actually, something that needs to be healed, not understanding that there's lie-based pain that we're going to talk about in a little bit that's actually the cause of that pain. So yeah, first time sessions sometimes are like that, and I thought that too, when I first started. But it's amazing how when you start to feel the emotions, the memories start to connect to other things, maybe even deeper things that the memory I brought forward was just a symptom of what really the issue was. So yeah, that happens, but not very often, honestly, at least with me. More people just come in and, they have general negative feelings they're struggling with, or relationships, in their current life.
And we can work with anybody who's willing to do the work. But
Right.
some people have jumped ahead of the process, which is okay,
Hmm.
which shows that they realize it's just not their current circumstances that cause them to react the way they react, but it could be other things that are tied to growing up and interpreting life in a skewed way, which is very easy
Hmm.
to do.
Yeah.
So the idea that our story matters, bringing awareness to our story,
Hmm.
you're already starting to bring the unconscious, those implicit
Hmm.
memories to the forefront so that they're more explicit memories.
Hmm.
And I think it's a quote from Carl Jung. This came up in one of our groups. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Now,
Hmm.
as believers, hopefully we don't call
Yeah.
anything fate, but that's his quote.
Right.
So yeah, he wasn't coming from a biblical worldview, but he recognized something that's just it's profoundly true that what's
Hmm.
hidden inside of us stays buried. It ends up shaping our lives from beneath the surface, right? I think
Hmm.
of the iceberg. Our logo used to be an iceberg. So
Right.
how much more, yeah, that exists below the surface than above?
And I think, just thinking of that quote, that for a long time, in past history and psychology, and especially where Jung, he was around when Freud was around,
Hmm.
and he, the thinking was these things that happened to me are what shaped me,
Hmm.
and it's only been in recent years that people have understood that really that event isn't what shapes you. It's like I mentioned earlier, it's the belief there. So just getting the subconscious to come forward with what the clues are to what's really going on inside is just one part of the process. That's the memory part of the process. But that alone doesn't get us free. And so I think people have been stuck before. For example, when you mentioned that people come with a memory that they want to get resolved, when people know terrible things have happened to them and they come to the sessions with those things thinking that somehow, I've talked through this, I've prayed through this, I don't know why I can't get over this thing that happened and I can't release the anger that's there because they're not really looking for what we would help them to see, um, that's actually buried in the memory that needs to be exposed. And again, we'll talk about that when
Hmm.
we talk about the lie in a minute, because you're
Hmm.
right, all the elements of melt, the memory, emotion, the lie, and the truth and transformation, they are all intertwined.
Hmm.
But it's important to understand each one of those pieces is necessary and needs to be there. So, yeah, moving the subconscious into our present awareness where we can look at it and the elements there can be exposed is really important. But it's getting the relief from the lies that are there that actually brings the healing or the transformation that's needed.
And the idea that they all are in play at the same time. It's very
Right.
easy for us. I've seen this over and over, and I've seen it a couple different times recently with like a grandparent who dies,
Mm-hmm.
and the child loved that grandparent and feels all this grief, all this
Mm-hmm.
pain and sadness, and doesn't know where to put it. And in a lot of those cases, we didn't understand how to minister to those children, how to parent those children, how to love those children
Mm-hmm.
through those places. And there's people bring up, oh, when my mom gets this phone call that her dad died, and watching her mom react
Mm-hmm.
to that and
Yeah.
what happened inside that young boy or that young girl, and then the days leading up to the funeral, and then the actual funeral itself,
Mm-hmm.
and then the burial, and then the days that followed. And people, they touch on something that's really important in their life, very core in things that got misconstrued in their heart. And so it's like, well, I'm in a memory. Well, you're in a memory that might cover a week or two or three or a month or longer than that. And
Mm-hmm.
yet they're in some level of pain. They're feeling some level of emotion, and they're just kind of jumping around because the mind, once it starts to connect those things, just wants to like really look at it from that intentional conscious standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we're quite often herding cats as facilitators. And I don't mean that in
Mm-hmm.
any derogatory, negative way. It's just people's pain is all out there.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so to know that if you're receiving a session, you might find a facilitator trying to help you focus in. It seems like, and research has shown that the more that we get to detail of specific moments, the more helpful that is. And so that happened
Mm-hmm.
recently in a session with somebody, and they were talking about all that. And then it's what we say as facilitators is, okay, I appreciate all that. That had to be hard for that
Yeah.
young boy, that young girl.
Mm-hmm.
And as you look at that, and it might not matter, but just see where you find yourself feeling the most pain. And they might
Mm-hmm.
first say, well, all of it. Okay, I understand that. But as you feel through that, just see where you go. Is it the phone call? Is it the funeral? Is it after?
Mm-hmm.
And we keep our hands open as facilitators then when we ask those questions or make those suggestions of what to take a look at that's already been
Uh-huh.
presented. I'm often surprised where somebody might say, well, it wasn't until after.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
like a week later when something was
Mm-hmm.
happening and
Yeah.
my mom went back to the gravesite, and that's what really hits me. Okay, right there as you're at the gravesite, feel what you feel there and allow that emotion to really serve us in that moment to be able to identify what's believed there. And when the memory, the emotion, the lie or lies are all in play at that place, and they're open, which is a whole nother deal to
Yeah.
receive what the Lord has for them. They find some resolve there. And then it's okay, let's go back
Mm-hmm.
through the phone call, the funeral, days after. How does that all feel? And then they might say, wow, that all feels better. Or now that I go back to the phone call, oh, there's more that's still there. And then they focus just on that phone call
Mm-hmm.
and see what the Lord has for them there as they identify the lies. So that emotion
Mm-hmm.
in combination with those memories, and most importantly, identifying those beliefs that can never be true about us being alone, unworthy, unacceptable, defective, all those things. That's where we
Mm-hmm.
really find the deepest healing for people.
Yeah, and it's amazing how people, if you just give them the time and the opportunity just to feel into the pain, they'll say things, like, I'm never going to be loved again. I'm never going to be whatever, or I shouldn't have, I always, never talk to them about how I felt, or, that it just naturally kind of comes out of them, these statements that
Mm-hmm.
are really the most painful things. And so if you let them describe, like you talked about, the story of where they're really hurting, they say things that are for us, because we know to listen for those things, very indicative of what is the real problem here, not just the loss or whatever it is that they're dealing with. But those statements are they're very they expose actually the thinking that's really hurting the person there. And that's really helpful, because we can ask them, so what are you believing because this that you just said? And it can help focus them in quickly to where really the issue is, so that they don't wallow, not in a bad way, but just get stuck in a whole pool of negative emotions. But they can actually hone in on what's really the problem here. All of that may hurt, but what's really kind of the underpinning here that needs to be dealt with? And so I love that, after we've done this enough times, things become very apparent to us as a person talks about what's really happening. And if we ask them, they also get more crystallized on it. I just think we're very helpful in that way, because we help them to see what needs to be dealt with there. Otherwise, you can get stuck in your pain and not really know the way out and suffer for a long time with it. So I love that. And the Holy Spirit helps us always,
Mm.
to pinpoint what's really, as they speak, what's really the issue that needs to be dealt with.
And there
And
could,
not that it's us that
Mhm.
figures that out, but it helps us to ask questions so that they can see it.
Yeah, I just had a session where I said, I don't know if this is coming from me or this is coming
Hmm.
from the Lord. If it's coming from the Lord, definitely this is something that might be helpful for you to take a look at and process through and lift up to Him. If it's
Hmm.
me, maybe it'll be helpful. But if it's the Lord, it definitely will be if you cooperate with
Hmm.
Him. There's
Yeah.
also things that happen at so many granular levels, I guess. I don't know how to put it, where even in those places of loneliness and pain where we make these decisions, like I'm on my own now. I have to do it
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
And it's just these subtle things that can even happen with a 5, 6, 7, 8 year old in those places of
Hmm.
pain. And just to illustrate that, just from something recent, somebody was in a place where uh, they'd gotten some truth and revealed that decision, but hadn't really confronted it head on. And then we reviewed it because the person that was not so awesome in that moment, I think I might have said something like, "Okay, how does your heart feel toward them?" And the person said, "Well, it's on them." And
Hmm.
could that
Yeah.
be, is that true? Well, there's a tone. We are not to carry
Yes.
certain things for people, right? There's certain things that aren't ours. We don't have to be responsible for everything in the whole world. And so
Right.
um, they have to deal with that. But if you do it this long enough, you kind of connect with tone. And I just said, okay, as you feel that, I said, is there any sense of compassion toward that person? Or is it
Mm.
more like this, a little bit of maybe grr, or, yep, they're just,
Right. Yeah.
and when that person was obedient to what the Lord was calling them to recognize, it really was more like, well, forget them, which isn't the heart of
Hmm.
Jesus. And that
No.
person understood that, but to have that called out by a brother in
Right.
Christ, that just opened up a whole new level of healing when we took a look at what was going on there and exposed more
Hmm.
things. And then it was looked at that person in that memory and it was, oh, well, yeah, they have to deal with that. And it was this, you could use the same words,
Yes. Right.
but with a completely different heart posture.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. I think one of the benefits of us as facilitators and everyone that we train, where we stress the importance of us getting continual ministry, is that the more truth we receive from the Lord in an experiential environment, experiential experience, the more we really, it's like you're getting to know a friend. And
mm,
so you know that friend and you kind of have a good sense of how they might react in a certain situation, especially if you've seen them react in that similar situation with lots of other people many, many, many times as we minister. And so when we see or we sense those attitudes that quote the Lord, told them or said or expressed, we can tell when it's not Him a lot of the time, and we don't necessarily try to explain that to the person, but we know, okay, we need to test this to make sure that they're really receiving from the Lord and not just their own attitudes. And so we encourage them to look at the memory, to see how that feels, to look at that emotion they just felt, instead of it just going by us. And the reason I bring that up is because I've worked with counselors and pastoral type people who minister to others, and many times they don't even catch that.
mm,
They don't catch that there's a wrong attitude here that the person's own mind is expressing, but thinking that it's from Jesus when it's not. For example, one time, one young woman I ministered to, she had some painful experiences as a little girl. And when we asked the Lord about, her unwillingness to feel it, what she heard was, um, you don't have to feel that because you don't want it to define you. That's just obviously not Jesus to us, because we know Jesus never backs away from anything and He has the solution. So why would He not want the person to go into that place of pain and receive his truth there? So yeah, it's just wonderful that we as facilitators do continue to come to the Lord with what's going on in our hearts. And
mm.
all the people that work with us that we're training, we encourage them and require it actually, for them to continue to get this experiential relationship with Jesus where they become closer to him and really his heart for people, so that those kind of situations don't just go by left unchecked, and the person thinks that what they received, was from God when it really wasn't. Which can be really damaging and just to lead a person into a wrong perspective of who he is.
Thank you for listening to the Cross Counsel podcast. We invite you to visit crosscounsel.com to learn more about genuine healing and becoming a more useful instrument in God's kingdom purposes. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate, and share this podcast. It helps others discover the same potential for hope and healing found only in Jesus. Again, thank you for listening.